So what I'd like to do in this session is take you through the basics of utilizing the sales order management process in SAP Business One. You may not be aware of this, but probably around 60 to 70% of all the customers that are using SAP Business One in some way, shape or form come from a wholesaling or distribution background where they buy, stock and sell a product. So this is a very, very popular aspect of the solution, and it's an area where SAP Business One really does well, and that's in the management of this entire process. Now, the process can be as simple or as complex as you need it to be. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the basic functionality, and we're going to go through the process from looking at creating a sales quotation, turning that sales quotation into a sales order, turning that sales order into a delivery, and then the delivery into an accounts receivable invoice. And then in other sessions, we'll look at some of the different permutations of the process. For example, being able to, as Ari Shapiro talks about in one of his tips of the week, being able to link a purchase order to a sales order and have a purchase order automatically created off the back end of a sales order and things like that. But in best practice form, you always have to learn to crawl before you walk, before you run. So let's go ahead and we'll do that. So just again, a quick reminder, you'll see I've got my common functions here, and I've got all of these application options set up here in my common functions to go straight to a sales quotation, to a sales order, or a delivery. But I'm going to go in from the modules aspect. And again, remember, this is 9.3, so if things look a little bit different, that's because it is the very latest version of SAP Business One. So when you're starting off in the sales order management solution, you go in here through sales, and you can start off with what's called a sales quotation. Now, this might be a scenario where you've had a customer who's ring up and they said, look, can you send me a quotation for this product and this product and this product? So let's start there, and I'll choose sales quotation. Now, by the way, if you're looking at this and you're thinking, hang on, Richard, you're in a web browser, but this looks like the full SAP Business One client. You're absolutely right. That's exactly what I'm doing. Some of you may know that I spend a lot of time looking at the cloud and how to take the most advantage of the cloud. I actually use and recommend a product called Ericom Connect. And it's Ericom Connect that enables you to be able to run a full SAP Business One client in a web browser without having to load up any additional software on the client or anything like that. So take a look at some of the other sessions I've done about Business One in the cloud if you want to learn more about that, but just thought I'd mention it now. So you can see, here is my sales quotation, and of course you start off with your standard information. So you can start off with your customer, and of course you can pick your customer from a list, and I'm going to grab my favorites, Earthshaker Corporation. And you can see there's a whole range of these additional fields that you can populate. Now remember, with any one of these screens, it opens up in a small window, but you can always maximize the available space just by simply clicking on the maximize window option in the top right hand corner of the screen. Now that you've got that done, you'll see that you've got a much bigger space to work in. And you'll see that when you come into a quotation or an order or even an invoice, there are two types that you can work with. You can work with an item-based transaction, or you can come in here and you can work with a service-based transaction. And what's the difference? Well, of course, an item transaction requires a code, and that can be either a stock item or a non-stock item where you carry the stock and track the stock, or you don't. And of course, a service item is when you are just going ahead and you're putting a description of what the work was that was done, and you're putting that information in. Now, you'll see this blanket agreement number, and you might have noticed when we started, there was a preceding option on here called sales blanket orders. We're going to come back and look at that in a little bit more detail in another session. But for now, don't worry about the blanket agreement number. But let's come back in here and let's look at the item. Now remember, in all of the SAP Business One screens, you actually have a couple of options when you're working in a grid. So if the screen is based on a grid like this one is, other ones that you can do this with are things like purchase orders and so on. There are two ways that you can work in this screen. You can work in the grid format, or you can work in a form format. A form format, does that make sense? Well, yes, it does. So you can work in a form. What's the difference? Well, the difference is you've got a grid like this, okay, where everything's laid out across a line and you've got one line per item. But what you can do is when you're in the grid and you select a line item in the grid, you can right click. Now the right click button is your friend in a lot of these screens, because right click unlocks so many additional options inside the screen, and I'd encourage you to play around with those. So for example, you can come in here, you can right click and you can select row details, and you'll see what will happen is that it will bring up this form, and then we can move that across to the middle of the screen if you want. And so don't forget, when you're working in this form, not only in the form but in the grid, you also, if you've been given the permissions, have the ability to specify which of these fields are available and which ones are not. So you'll see in the form, in the row details form, you can see a lot more of the information than you can in the sales quotation screen. But if you've got the rights, as I said before, you can come in here and you can go up here onto your toolbar and you can click on form settings. And this is where you're able to go in and start choosing which fields show up in these different versions of this screen. So the version I'm looking at right now is the table format. So remember, I can go in here and I can say, you know what, in my system I want to be able to do data entry not on the basis of my item numbers, but maybe on the item numbers that my business partners use. Business One has that capability. You can go in here and you could switch on the BP catalog number, and you'll see there are two options here. I can make it visible, and I can make it active. So I can see it and then I can edit it. If I untick this, then I can't edit the value. I can only see what the corresponding value is. That wouldn't be particularly helpful in this particular screen, because I want to maybe do lookups by typing in the BP catalog number or whatever the case may be, so I'll leave that switched on. And then you'll see what happens is when I click OK, now there it is, there's my BP catalog number, and it's come in here. So remember, up here on your form settings, very, very handy thing to have. And this is your table format. And you can see all the other fields that are available. So for example, if you don't want to see the cost of goods sold product line, okay, you can remove that. Or if you don't want it to be able to be edited, you can make that inactive. So again, you can come in here into this screen and come through here and find that particular field. Now you can do it by scrolling through these, or of course you can come up here and click on find, and you can just type cogs, and you'll see what does it do. It's automatically auto-locating on this information, and so I can say, you know what, I actually don't want to see the cogs product line. So I say okay to that, and you'll see that's now gone. Alright, and so my UI changes have been saved successfully. A couple of other things that you could do as well while we're in this screen. If you want to change these fields around as well, you can come in here into your form settings again, and then go and select your table format. And if I want the unit price to show before the quantity, then all I need to do is I can come down here till I find my unit price. Alright, and you'll see I can select it and highlight it and drag it up and pop it in before my quantity. I'll put it after my factor 4. Actually, let's move that one up. Alright, so now I've got unit price and then quantity, and I'll say OK, and you'll see, bang, I've now got my unit price that is showing up before my quantity. So very, very handy way to be able to adapt and adjust these screens. Now, the other thing, remember, we've got is our row details screen. Same scenario there. I click here on the form settings and I can go into the row format and I can do the same thing here. So the thing to bear in mind is everything that I've just shown you, you can actually do in all of the screens that we're going to look at now. Sales quotation, sales order screen, sales invoice screen. Why? Because they're all based on the same fundamental layout. Okay, so that's going to make life really, really easy. So let's go in and let's continue on with our quotation. So I'm going to go and find my item. Again, I've got my lookup, and remember, you can do a search on any one of these columns that's in this screen. Now, when you start typing, it's going to be searching through the column that currently has the sort value. So you see right now I'm sorting on the item number. So if I start typing J.B, all right, what's it doing? It's actually not going to find my JB office print because it's trying to get as close as it can to the letter J in the item number field. All right, so let's get rid of that. It goes back to normal sort. But of course, if I double click on the column header for my item description and I start typing J.B, you'll see immediately it automatically starts sorting on the basis of that. Now remember, this is a form as well. This lookup, this list of items, is a form. So you have the capability to go in here into your form settings as well and add additional information. So when you're doing a lookup, you might say, you know what, I want to see these three values, but I also want to come in here and maybe I want to see what my quantity available is. So now we'll come back in and I'm going to select my JB Office Print 1111 and I'm going to choose that product. And so now I can continue on. How many did the customer want? Well, they wanted a quote for 10 of them. Not 101, but 10. Let's go back and change that to a 10. All right, do I want to give them a discount, and so on and so forth. Now, another thing that's really, really nice in the user interface of SAP Business One, on some of these fields, if you press Control Tab, you'll see you get access to a whole bunch of additional information. If I right click on that field, what you'll get is you'll get the option to be able to see, for example, the last prices. So if you click last prices, it will now bring up a last prices report, and it's going to show you all the times that that customer purchased from you this particular product, all right, and what did they pay for it. Now you've got the ability to just narrow this down so you're only seeing the times where it was quoted to them and how much they were quoted, but you can also say, okay, show me all the times when they placed an order, or show me all the times when the order was actually processed successfully. So it might be invoices, so I'll switch off the sales quotations and the invoices. So if the customer says to you, hey, you know what, last time I bought that product, I actually got that for $200, you can come back in here and you can say, well, respectfully, I've just gone back through our sales order history and I can't see that you've actually purchased it at that price, certainly not in the last 10 times. Now you can go in here and you can say, show me the last 100 times. All right, and then you can go in here and you can refresh that, and obviously that's going to show you even more, but they haven't purchased that product more than 100 times. All right, so you'll see you've got some options there. And then of course you've got this option here with this ellipsis. You can click on the status, and you can also go in and you can show the blanket agreement statuses. Okay, so if you are looking up your blanket agreements, so you can get it to show you those scenarios where your blanket agreements, and I know we haven't talked about those in detail yet, but you can go in and you can show additional information about that. So again, these screens have a lot of hidden power in them. All right, so I would encourage you to go and take a look as you're learning the system and see, and as you're thinking about solving those challenges in your business and how can you work more efficiently with Business One, the more you know about the solution, the better and more able you'll be to solve those problems without necessarily having to pick up the phone and ring somebody, or pay somebody for consulting services or whatever the case may be. Now, hopefully, as you've gone through the implementation process, your partner will have sat down and they will have talked to you about your... Okay, so there it is. There's my last prices report. And of course, on my quantity, if I do the same thing here, all right, what I can do is I can go in here and I can click on available to promise. And the system is going to go in and do an available to promise calculation, and it's going to show you at any particular point in time what you actually have available and what you have that's been ordered, and so on and so forth. So you can see that information and you can say okay to that. Now you might be looking at this screen and you might be thinking, hang on, well, what about all my other warehouses? Well, can I see how much stock I've got in each of my warehouses and what my available quantity is? So yes, you can. What you need to do is you need to make sure that the warehouse field is showing. So how would you fix that? Come up here into your table format, and you can come in here and you can find your warehouse. So again, let's start searching. WH, there it is, or just put a W, there it is, warehouse. I'm going to make that visible and I'm going to make it active. And I also want to see maybe my quantity in stock. Alright, so I'll select that. Now you'll see that's a calculated value, so you can't override it. So that's the way you would expect it to be. So now I say OK to that, and now you'll see I've got my warehouse is now showing, and I've got my in-stock quantity. So if I'm here on my warehouse, if I come in here and I right click on my warehouse, what I can do is I can come in and I can say show me a list of my warehouses, and it's going to show me all those warehouses. I can again right click on that screen and I can say show me my warehouse balance report. So if I click on there, it's now showing each of my warehouses, and it's showing me what's my quantity in stock and my quantity that's committed already on other orders, and what's my quantity available. Okay, so that's really, really nice. You can go in and say, look, I don't have that stock in my warehouse, but I know I've got it in another warehouse. So if you need to, you can then do a stock transfer if your company processes allow for that, and transfer the stock into this warehouse. Make sense? And then of course, remember, you've got your drill down golden arrows that allow you to be able to click on there and drill down to the underlying information that's sitting behind each one of those